Good afternoon and welcome to ISTI's third annual Student Research Showcase. This event is being recorded. As an attendee, this doesn't impact you, but we wanted to note it to our panelists and presenters. I'm Emily Cooper, Director of the Illinois Science and Technology Institute, pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm honored to be here with all of you today. The Student Research Showcase celebrates a year of student exploration and mentorship and represents the hard work of over 1,000 students from 24 high schools across the state of Illinois. These extraordinary students collaborated with experts in their chosen field of research to explore new ideas, iterate based on mentor feedback, form relationships outside of their virtual classroom, and come up with findings based on their project journey. ISTI was thrilled to see relationships form between mentors and students as conversations pivoted from literature reviews and data analysis to what it's like to study at their mentor's university or work at their mentor's company, all the way to which Harry Potter house they each belonged to. We know some of these mentoring relationships will continue far beyond the projects. ISTI watched this year as students' confidence in their ideas grew from mentor validation and as students used their own experience from their community and from their challenges to come up with groundbreaking conclusions and future innovations. Today, we will hear 7 of these students in 5 projects, which were narrowed down from 56 phenomenal student applications. ISTI, alongside our esteemed panel that you'll hear from shortly, went through the painstaking task of selecting today's 5 projects. Throughout a unique year filled with unprecedented obstacles, we are so honored to have the opportunity to work with all of the 1,000 students in this year's program. Thank you, students. Your futures are so bright. I'd like to thank the amazing educators who provided the structure and virtual classroom time for their students to work with their mentors this year. Against so many barriers, these teachers saw the benefit of allowing space for mentorship and independent research. We see and appreciate all of you. I'd also like to thank our amazing mentors. We have almost 400 mentors representing 130 organizations from top universities to Fortune 500 companies who dedicated their time each week to guide, encourage, and collaborate with ISTI's students. Your commitment to our students during a disconnected year was hugely impactful, and we can't do this without you. Finally, I'd like to thank my colleague, Sarah Galubas, the program manager for the Mentor Matching Engine and the architect of today's event. Sarah's dedication to this program, to our students and teachers, and to the mentors is evident every single day. She is an encyclopedia of mentor expertise and student research resources, and she puts her heart and soul into ensuring that students and mentors have meaningful connections. Today is the culmination of her hard work, and we're so glad to share it with all of you.
Thank you so much, Emily. I do want to take a moment as well to emphasize thanks to this year's sponsor, National Louis University, and again, to emphasize those points that Emily made, thanking our virtual mentors, emphasizing that this year's is possible in part because of student scholarships that were made, and thanking you all to join as well.
And before I pass things over to Sarah for the duration of the event, there are many ways to get involved in the student impact you'll see today. As mentioned earlier, ISTI's volunteer mentors are essential to our program. ISTI mentorship is virtual, skills-based, and helps to create lines of sight to different paths beyond high school and the workforce skills needed to get there. If you have interest or know of people in your network who may be interested, please reach out to ISTI. ISTI is also always looking to provide these opportunities to additional students, and we never want funding to be a barrier. ISTI makes an effort to provide several partial and full scholarships each year, and to help us continue to do this, please consider donating to support our work. Finally, follow along. ISTI shares the journey of our teachers, students, and mentors each year, and promoting the hard work of these amazing future innovators helps us to reach new audiences. Our third colleague, Becky, will be sharing the links to our social media in the chat, and we hope you'll follow, share, and like our updates as we look toward a new academic year. We appreciate your attendance at today's exciting event, and here to tell you more is the MME guru herself, Sarah.
Thanks again, Emily. As Emily mentioned, my name is Sarah. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the project manager for the Mentor Matching Engine. MME was actually originally created, some of you might know this, in 2012 with the goal of eliminating the barriers of traditional mentorship. So that's anything from geography to transportation to any access issues. And as you might imagine, this year that has become even more critical. This year, nearly 1,000 students connected virtually with volunteer mentors on long-term projects. But what makes MME unique is the cross-section of topics and the student interest in a breadth of variety of subjects. We see this demonstrated every day. These students conducted research in everything from freshman biology to senior research topics and everything in between. Additionally, volunteers stepped up to help our students. As Emily mentioned, we have nearly 400 volunteers, and we are grateful for them today and every day for the work they do to support these students. I did want to flag for you all that though we will be hearing from 5 students from 5 different high schools, this is a statewide event. We work with 24 high schools across the state, and each year we work to grow that as well. We're hoping in the 2021-22 year to grow this list even further. Though we weren't able to include the voice of every high school in today's event, we did want to give you a taste for the different student voices involved in MME throughout the year. With that in mind, I'm going to play for you a brief video of the different student applications from this year's showcase.
Hello, my name is Katie Lee, and my project is focused on the negative environmental impacts of the fast fashion industry.
So my project studied how dogs respond to human distress and relaxation signals.
Current data demonstrates a relationship between a type of higher education institution and mental health treatment utilization. However, the reasoning for why this is true remains undocumented.
My topic that I'm researching this year is perceptions of coaches and athletes on beneficial athletic traits.
So I decided to write a review of literature on the effects of different materials on solar cell energy efficiency.
My main objective is to develop an algorithm to identify exoplanets.
Breaking down evolution and determining the relationship between evolution and environmental pressure.
Mentorship is really important because it provides students with an outlet to work with a professional, someone who is an expert.
Being new to research, my mentor, Murillo Alves Zaccarelli, has been very helpful in guiding me.
My mentorship has been really important to my creation of my topic, my methodology, and my study.
My mentor, Megan Mafalate, was incredible from the very beginning to the very end. She was right there, helping me and guiding me and providing me with information that was crucial to the project. It would not be the same without her.
My mentor has demonstrated to me the importance of mentorship and having someone that encourages me to use my critical thinking skills when they ask follow-up questions about ideas I hadn't even considered noting in my study.
And so we kind of went back and forth a bit. He asked me leading questions, explained really difficult topics to me, and I eventually found better articles and solidified my research question.
My mentor, Andrew, has been really helpful in giving feedback on my paper as well as giving ideas on where I could take my project.
And then he gave me tips on learning more of the complex physics-related topics.
Probably what I value the most about this mentorship is the fact that I was the one driving the project.
Getting the opportunity to do that is an absolute honor. I'm so grateful that I get to do that and learn from these people that know exactly what they're talking about and know exactly what they're doing.
I had a vision and I knew what I wanted to study, and my mentor helped me achieve my fullest potential.
I'm constantly learning new things, not only about the mental health field, but also about how the data collection process works.
That's why I believe this is important. By having a professional who was once in a similar position as me in school, he was able to summarize the concepts in a way that simplified everything while also allowing me to do my own research to further my study, and then I was able to grasp such an interesting topic.
I personally chose this topic because I'm very passionate about fashion and sewing, as well as quality clothing.
Because I believe solar energy is an extremely interesting topic that has a lot of applications as a more sustainable resource.
And how dogs are really interesting. There's so much we don't know about them, and they are still part of many of our lives almost every single day.
With more exposure, I hope to inspire others to be more conscious about their clothing and the environment.
To get people to see my research, to interact with sports, and see that maybe this relationship between the coach and the athlete is more complicated than it might seem.
I truly believe that mental health, especially nowadays, is a serious issue that should be addressed on college campuses.
With that in mind, as you can tell, we are always blown away by the student innovation and the work that our students do in these projects every year. We really wanted to go out of our way as we set out to go forward with the Student Research Showcase this year to showcase the breadth of student projects and subject matter that they address. To do that, we put forth 5 prizes. The awards that you will see today are in order: the Eye on the Prize Award for students engaging in hard sciences. The Community Champion Award goes to a student whose project was really community oriented. The third award goes to a group of students whose project is focused in the tech sphere. Fourth, you will see a student who is new to research and will be receiving our Rockstar Rookie Award. And finally, you will hear from a student who will be moving forward with our Engaging in Equity Award for her project in social justice. As Emily mentioned, this was an especially competitive year, and because of that, we reached out for some help. We had panelists to narrow down the 1,000 students, 56 applications, to these top 5 presenters who you will see today, who are truly extraordinary. I do want to give a moment for those panelists to introduce themselves, starting with, starting with James Gillespie.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. I'm James Gillespie, Executive Director of the Prism Institute, which is part of Sterling Bay. And Sterling Bay is an innovative real estate development investment firm. And great to be here.
Thank you so much, James. Kyla, if you would like to introduce yourself next.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Kyla. I'm 18 years old and I'm a student at Stanford University studying computer science and international relations. I just graduated high school, so a lot of the projects that you all worked on and the things that you're focusing on in high school are incredibly inspiring to me. I think they're going to move and shake the world, just like our generation has been doing and dreams of doing in the future. So congrats to everyone here today and the families here today. You should be so proud of all the accomplishments you have. And so I'm the founder and CEO of my own organization called Bits and Bytes Cybersecurity Education, which is a national nonprofit that's dedicated to educating and equipping all vulnerable populations with the cybersecurity risk mitigation and awareness skills needed for the future. So we'll go into a bunch of schools or youth groups and we'll bring our curriculum to them and just watch them be inspired by cybersecurity. And that just came out of the same gusto and inspiration that you all have taken when you started your projects, just realizing that there's a problem in the world that you have everything in you and you can actively be a part of the solution for. So I just realized that in my community, there was no such kind of cybersecurity education happening, whereas these data and attacks, a lot of them boil down to human error or humans not having kind of a culture around security, of valuing security in their products or the processes around them. So there were a lot of gaps that I saw, and just from there, just starting to build a solution from that and that's exactly what you all have done. So I think there's a lot of power in just realizing that you yourself can be an innovator and walking through the world, looking at problems as if you have everything inside you to build a solution for. And then that is exactly what happened with my second organization. I just kind of realized that there wasn't enough women in the space of cybersecurity and how difficult it was for a young person to break into the space. So I started GirlCon, which is now an annual international tech conference that happens now virtually. It used to be in the city of Chicago, but we unite around in person it was around 350, but virtually we were able to get around 700 young women to come and speak about technology, raise their hand, not be afraid to network or build connections and mentorships in the space. And I can't emphasize the importance of mentorship. So again, this program is incredible for several reasons, but the focus on mentorship is so critical. And I think in my journey, I've had several mentors, and each of them have helped in different ways, getting me kind of to achieve different goals that I've had. So I think having mentors is the best thing you can do, and not being afraid. Take this as your next step, to not be afraid to asking somebody else to help you in any project you have in the future, pitching yourself to other people, because you have everything inside you as an innovator to make a difference, and everybody involved in your journey should be proud and celebrate that about you. So I think that is all from me, but thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to hear from all the projects and see all the exciting innovation from all the students today.
Thank you so much, Kyla. I'm going to pass the mic now to Shantae. Shantae, if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, Shantae Thurman here. My pronouns are she, her, Aya. I'm the co-founder of an organization called The Darkest Horse. It's a next-gen DEI, meaning diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy based in Chicago. And we focus on radical inclusion, the future of work, emerging technology, health, well-being, and human potential. We actually partner with a lot of forward-thinking organizations such as ISTI and other startups, nonprofits, and basically innovative corporations throughout the country, trying to help them cultivate and activate their workplace culture, but also really helping them to infuse the principles related to diversity, equity, and inclusion into their product, services, and offerings. I also have the great privilege and honor of working at Village MD, another Chicago-based startup, and I'm the director of DEI over there. So I encourage you all to look that up. We're hiring lots of young talent. And the other thing I want to do is just piggyback off of what Kyla said. And like her, I have a STEM background and really kind of got into this work because of some great mentors and teachers that took their time with me. And if it wasn't for me getting a scholarship to attend school and go to nursing school, I don't think I'd be here today. And so I really take that seriously. And I encourage all of you on the call to just explore as you're listening and learning today and beyond, and to take advantage of the folks who are here today on the panel. Reach out to us, engage with us, let us know if you have any questions. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shantae. We're so excited to have you. Andrew, if you'd like to go next.
I'm Andrew Nyborg. Pronouns are he, him, his. I lead a group of scientists at a company called Horizon Therapeutics. We develop new therapeutics, study diseases, and ultimately try and find the next generation of therapeutics to cure a variety of rare and rheumatologic, immunologic conditions. How did I get here? Quite a number of years ago, as an undergraduate in college, I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. And as I studied to earn a degree in chemistry, because a family physician told me that I would go far in life if I majored in chemistry. So I took a lot of chemistry, and while doing that, I began doing research for some of the professors that I took classes from. And during those research projects, really, as a fairly young undergraduate, having the opportunity to ask questions and do science that only a handful of people in the world had ever even considered, attempting to answer questions that no one in the world had the technology or capabilities to answer, was just intellectually exciting. It was something that I really fell in love with. As a result, I chose to earn a PhD in biochemistry and did postdoctoral fellowship in neuroscience and neurodegeneration with the intent to really study human biology of disease and therapeutic strategies for neurodegeneration the rest of my career. As it turns out, things go all over the place during your career. I transitioned into a small biotech company that was venture capital funded, and can tell you that that was one of the most exciting transitions in my life, to work for a small company. You're really driving new therapeutics for Alzheimer's disease, new strategies to understand Alzheimer's disease. But the funding dried up, and I had to think of other new creative ways to do what I loved and yet make money. And as a result, my career has been across a variety of small and large companies to study diseases across infection, immunology, neuroscience, and a variety of other conditions as well. I love what I do. It gets me up in the morning. It forces me to think about what I do every kind of waking hour of the day, which probably drives my family crazy, but it's an exciting career that I love. In terms of mentorship, I've managed or mentored scientists from the high school level to very senior scientists in their career, undergraduates, graduate students, and I love doing that. I love helping them mature in their abilities to be analytical and thoughtful about research and really help solve problems that can take something from infancy or idea to the clinic in which we're helping patients.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you for being with us today. Maya, if you'd like to take the next 2 minutes to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Renko. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a professor and Coleman Chair of Entrepreneurship at DePaul University here in Chicago. I work with students in our entrepreneurship programs. We have major and minor in our undergraduate programs. So pretty much now anyone who studies at DePaul in any undergraduate program can take a minor in entrepreneurship. And I'm really excited about this opportunity because some of the best students, honestly, that we see, they come from all over the university and they are excited about starting businesses, and then they choose to minor in entrepreneurship with us. We also have a program at the graduate level, Master of Science in Entrepreneurship, and I'm a faculty director of that program as well. In terms of my career path, I am originally from Finland, which you can hear in my accent. I have always loved school ever since I was a little kid. I loved learning, I loved being at school, and I think that's how I kind of ended up on the academic career path and as a professor. I moved to the United States when I was doing my PhD program. I graduated from Turku School of Economics in Finland with a PhD, and also from Florida International University in Miami, Florida with a PhD. And then I got hired into a tenure track job here in Chicago at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Stayed there for 12 years, did a lot of research, moved from assistant to associate professor to full professor, and now I'm at DePaul since about a year ago. In terms of research, my research is social science research, business research. I study entrepreneurs. I study entrepreneurial companies. I do both quantitative and qualitative research, and I love research. That's what keeps me going. I'm really lucky and happy that I'm able to dedicate a big part of my time to research. In terms of mentoring, one thing that I wanted to mention, and this is especially for the younger folks, I think on this program, I remember being much younger myself and being afraid to ask people who seemed like they were in powerful and interesting positions. I was afraid to ask them for advice because somehow that power distance was intimidating. And the one thing that I would tell all the younger people is don't hesitate to ask for someone to be your mentor or advisor or whatever it is. Generally, people love to share their experience and expertise, and we love helping you to get to places where you should be going. So that would be the one thought that I would like to leave you with. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Maya. And I love those words of wisdom. On that note, we are going to move forward with today's presenters. This is just a quick overview of the 5 different groups, 7 different students, as Emily mentioned, that we will be hearing from today. To begin, we will start with the Eye on the Prize Award in the Hard Sciences, which will be awarded to Kaleia Maxey. And I'm going to allow her teacher to introduce herself here at the beginning and introduce Kaleia as well.
Hello, I'm Julie Reynolds, and I'm introducing Kaleia Maxey, my senior in the Biotechnology and Agriculture pathway here at the Chicago High School for Agricultural Sciences. Kaleia's project on designing green airbags was prompted from her interest in engineering, which she started when she was in 8th grade. She worked on a program mentoring young students and other people involved in STEM with making brainwave controlled cars or biodiesel cars. She took her engineering interest and her skills with her project on designing green airbags, looking for a safe, green alternative to the chemical used in airbags today. She worked with Carl Albright in the mentor matching platform, having him review her paper, help with calculations, and give her guidance along the way. Kaleia hopes to be an industrial engineer in the future and looks forward to selecting her college very soon.
Hi, my name is Kaleia Maxey, and I'm a senior at Chicago High School for Agricultural Sciences, graduating 2021, and I'm currently in the biotechnology pathway. My project is called Designing a Green Airbag, Changing the World One Step at a Time. Airbag inflators contain a chemical called sodium iodide, which is almost as poisonous as cyanide. The material is often sealed in a container and poses no risk to motor vehicle occupants during normal vehicle use or accidents when airbags inflate, but sodium iodide can cause a large amount of human health effects when the vehicles are junked or when accidental spills do occur, and this could harm people and wildlife. Some effects will include exposure to the chemical causing respiratory failure and convulsions. Sodium iodide can also easily dissolve in water and in the environment, hence the need for a green-friendly airbag. The purpose of this experiment is to apply chemical engineering to create airbags that are suitable for the protection of the environment. My hypothesis is that if the highest chemical mass is used of 4.88 grams of sodium bicarbonate and 3.88 grams of citric acid, the airbag will inflate and cushion the water balloon best, making it have the highest survival rate. In terms of my materials, I use 16 water balloons, a meter stick, a wash bottle, a lab apron, 80 milliliters of water, a graduated cylinder, plastic cup, 4 resealable bags, 2 plastic weigh boats, citric acid, spatulas, and sodium bicarbonate. In this experiment, my independent variable was essentially the mass of citric acid and sodium bicarbonate, and the dependent variable was the inflation time in height, as well as the survival rate of the balloons when dropped from different heights. So in terms of the experiment, it was actually divided into 2 parts. So there's the chemical procedure and then the engineering procedure. So for the chemical procedure, I used a balance. I weighed 4.28 grams of sodium bicarbonate and 3.28 grams of citric acid in a weigh boat. I poured that sodium bicarbonate and citric acid into a 6 by 9 inch resealable bag. And then in the other corner, I took 20 milliliters of water measured by a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder and put that in the other corner. Then I resealed the bag and released the corners, in which induced a exothermic chemical reaction within the bag, releasing and creating gas. So after that, I increased the sodium bicarbonate and citric acid amounts by 0.3 grams and decrease, which actually created my different concentrations, and then I recorded if the bag inflated without breaking the seal. Along with that, after the airbags were prepared, I picked 4 different heights. So there was 39 centimeters, 166 centimeters, 237 centimeters, and 313 centimeters. I filled 16 water balloons with water, all with a mass of 350 grams each. So I would place each water balloon on top of each labeled inflated airbag, and for each trial, I dropped the balloon in airbag at the appropriate heights, repeating for each airbag, and then I analyzed the data. Within the experiment, I also used the airbag testing color coding system with the following colors: blue, green, red, yellow, so I knew the exact amount of sodium bicarbonate and citric acid in each airbag. The color coding system was also used so that I could categorize the mass flow rates for each airbag, calculating the total mass of the inflated bag divided by the time divided by 1,000. As this relates to the engineering aspect, the more mass that the airbag has, the more the Earth's acceleration will drag it to the ground. This is another reason why gravity was an important aspect, for it had to account for the final mass of the airbag and the water balloon's 350 grams. The green labeled airbag did not sustain the balloon at all and remained at 0. The blue labeled airbag survived up to 237 centimeters in the air, which is similar to the yellow labeled airbag, and the red labeled airbag withstood all the tests for the assigned heights. The highest height is 313 centimeters. After experimenting, I found that my hypothesis was actually incorrect. In the red labeled airbag, with a mass of 4.58 grams of sodium bicarbonate and 3.58 grams of citric acid, had the best survival rate and life-sustaining properties. I'd like to thank my mentor, Mr. Albrecht, for aiding me with the completion of my project. My mentor was a source of guidance, and with him, I became more knowledgeable about this field of science, and I was able to ask him questions and receive guidance when the research got challenging.
Thank you so much to Kaleia for that presentation. We are now going to welcome her up for this 5-minute Q&A with our panelists. And to kick it off, I believe, Maya, do you have the first question for Kaleia?
Yeah, absolutely. I was blown away by your research. That was really amazing. And what I wanted to know is, how did you come up with the idea for this study? Why car airbags? I mean, it sounds like a really, it's an important problem, and it's great you're working on it, but what made you study this topic?
Yeah, so I'm currently in, like was said in my intro, I am currently in a pre-professional engineering and science program at Chicago State University. I've been in it since 8th grade, and there we're introduced to different ideas of engineering, and one of them, and within that, we are introduced to like environmental consciousness and like looking at that. Along with that, I was also in an AP environmental class my junior year, so last year, and I was introduced to the environment. So I kind of developed a passion for the environment, because I think it's like the environment is so beautiful, but like we don't realize that and we take it for granted. So attacking a problem that does seem small, but actually does have a big impact on the environment is one way that I could help it.
That's great. I think that's the way that a lot of great entrepreneurs start as well, tackling a problem that may seem small, but actually in the larger scale has really big impact. So congrats, it's a great achievement.
All right, I'm going to open it up to the wider panel. Does anyone else have a question for Kaleia?
Yeah, I'd love to ask a question. So first of all, amazing project. That was really, really cool. And I love your focus on in the environment. One of the things that I thought of when I was watching as well was how it could have connection to like gender equity as well, because airbags are actually like airbags in our cars are actually mostly tested for men. So just out of curiosity, do you have like any ideas or like for the next step of the project, how that might be incorporated in sort of the testing phases of this to make it a project that's like equitable for all people?
I never thought about it, so thank you for bringing it up. But I did think of like in terms of like future, like in terms of the future, how would I further this project? So I definitely plan to like further this project and make it more large scale. But first I would start with like testing a simulation on like a 1 to 10 scale RC car. And then I would use like a delicate object such as like an egg, or use water balloons again, so that when I'm testing like it actually being collision instead of just gravity's pull, it would be more realistic. And after that, and after I find some success in that simulation and testing that, I also plan to actually start using more simulations like CAD design and stuff like that. And I was thinking, like you said, incorporating gender in it, because males are mostly are like one of the main like ideals when it comes to like testing airbag inflation and collisions. I definitely think that within that CAD design and like SolidWorks specifically, I'll be able to test it on different masses instead of just males.
In attempting to replace sodium azide as in airbags, is the volume of the expansion that you get in the airbag more important, or is the rate at which that expansion occurs more important? And are those different properties that you would have to measure to come up with the right compound to ignite that, that expansion?
Yeah, so definitely both. So the whole idea behind this experiment, what I was looking for, it was really two parts. So like the first part was inflating the airbag and then measuring the mass flow rate to determine how fast it was inflating kilograms per second. But then also it was actually dropping the airbag and figuring out how effective it would be like in a collision when force was on it. So moving forward, that the idea of incorporating the actual like how much it inflated definitely like is going to be important, because right now the whole idea was to see whether or not, or yeah, so pretty much that whole idea was to see whether or not when the mass did inflate, how effective it was, which is why I did the drop test to see what because each mass is different. So when I dropped the bag, it was different like amounts of like cushion for each water balloon, which determined whether or not it popped. So moving forward, I definitely want to incorporate like how much gas is actually in the bag. But essentially I was just looking at mass flow rate and then survival rate. But survival rate did like go with the idea of how much the airbag inflated.
Thanks, super fascinating.
Thank you, Kaleia. And if we have time for one more question, Shantae or James, if you'd like to ask a question as well.
Sure, I have one more question. I know from my own experiences just conducting research that we start off with a hypothesis and we have several things we anticipate to come as an outcome. Were there any surprises for you after, you know, or throughout this experiment and or afterwards that you're kind of still lingering on but want to share with the group?
Yeah, one surprise, because initially I did assume that the yellow labeled airbag, which is 4.88 grams of sodium bicarbonate and 3.88 grams of citric acid, I did assume that would be the best airbag. I thought that it would inflate fastest, have the highest mass flow rate, but also I thought that it would have the best survival rate as well, which is what I found incorrect. And like, I assume that because it had the most mass of the chemicals that I included in the airbag, I assumed that it would have the best outcome, but it didn't. And the red labeled airbag did. So that's why I definitely like furthering this project, I definitely want to look at more masses of sodium bicarbonate and citric acid, because of course I'm going to have to like upscale it. But yeah, definitely like moving forward, I want to see that relationship more and really like determine why it is that the yellow labeled airbag did not sustain the water balloon or really inflate the fastest.
Kaleia, thank you so much. And thank you for this section of the Q&A. Thank you for your presentation. And of course, thank you for your research project on MME all year. We've really enjoyed watching your progress throughout here and appreciate you applying. Again, as I mentioned, you are the recipient of the Eye on the Prize Award, so you will be receiving a certificate and a gift card in the mail to recognize your contribution. Now I'm going to move on to the next student presenter. Share my screen once more. And this student is the recipient of the Community Champion Award. And I will let his teacher introduce himself as well.
In one of my most recent casual check-ins with Cade Apton, I asked him what books he was reading lately, and he just responded, I picked up Kafka for fun. Because, you know, as his teacher, I noticed, why not throw a few existentialist writers in there with his already breadth of reading that he's done and his interest with Russian literature. His choice in books is actually a reflection of one thing that I find true about Cade, which I think you'll find true today as well. It is that he is genuine. Genuine in his academic interests, genuine in his communicative demeanor, genuine in his passion for enacting change in the world. My name is Christopher Thomas, and I have the joy of being an AP research teacher at Libertyville High School, where I've met and worked with Cade this year. I've been impressed by his academic intrigue, but what entices me the most about Cade is his heart. This research project is a direct result of Cade's self-reflection and his growing awareness and analysis of the impact of our country's prison system. The depth of Cade's research is already proving to offer exciting and significant insights to his research question. I'm so proud and humbled to be his teacher, and I'm just excited for him to be able to share more with you all today. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cade Apton, and I'm currently a senior at Libertyville High School in Libertyville, Illinois. And today, before I begin, I'd just like to say a very quick thank you to the ISTI and the MME for providing this wonderful opportunity to sit down, to learn, to listen, to speak, and to interact with some truly remarkable students who have prepared some projects that I'm very excited to learn more about, in addition to the 5 remarkable panelists who I'm also very excited to engage with. Lastly, just a very quick thank you to all of the folks who are guests today to listen in. I thank you all very much for coming. Now, today, I'd like to talk to you all about a type of education that is rigorous, a type of education that is selective, and a type of education that is reading intensive. If you're wondering, yes, I am speaking about college, but rather than the traditional four-year campus domain experience that we're all familiar with, I'd like to talk about a type of college experience that is behind bars, a prison college experience, and as I will refer to it today, and as I have done throughout my research, this is post-secondary correctional education in Illinois, which is the focus of my research and the focus of my talk with you today. Now, I'm often asked why, why prison education, why this research question? And I think it's very important to highlight this. On any given day, more than 1 in 100 adults are in jail or in prison. Now, for as long as I can remember, I've always been interested in the social sciences, history, economics, sociology, all of it. I've all been intrigued. But also coming from a perspective of a person who has had family members and friends cycle in and out of the criminal justice system in the US, I knew that at the outset of this research project, I really wanted to do something that was both personally meaningful to me, but also something that was academically intriguing. And thus was the birth of my research project, and thus is my inquiry into prison education. Now, once I formulated that I wanted to study correctional education, I knew that I had to come up with a methodology, a way of actually putting forth some form of research that was valid and that was credible. In order to do so, I set out to conduct an evaluative case study, which is the form of my research. Now, the research is comprised of qualitative-based interviews coming from a cohort of administrators, volunteers, and instructors, all of whom participate in programs across universities that offer education to various correctional facilities, ranging from Northwestern University to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And essentially, as I've learned throughout my extensive literature review and speaking with these various interviewees, I wanted to drive specifically my research at the program evaluation side of it, the logistics, the administration, the structuring of these programs, ultimately to see, what limitations exist in these programs, but also what things are being done well and what things can continue to be successes throughout this. And essentially, all of these things are combining together to drive it, trying to learn more about the effects of these programs, as my research question follows. Now, in terms of my progress thus far, although my project is still very much in the works, I have learned 3 emergent themes that I think are important to address today. The first of being which from my interviewees, as I've asked, is, what's a limitation that's important to highlight? And one thing I've learned is that there's a need for STEM-based courses in prison. Again, courses like literature and courses like history are prevalent in prisons, as I said, reading intensive before, but courses like physics or biology that perhaps require a lab, unfortunately, don't adhere to the security guidelines that are offered in correctional facilities. And my interviewees do believe that this is an important part of improving program evaluation, improving program structuring in prisons as well. Another important topic that has emerged is talking about, what separates a traditional college experience with a prison college experience. And as I've learned from my interviewees' experience, or lack thereof, which can unite and divide the students at times, as well as the instructors. And lastly, I think it's important to highlight, whenever I talk to an interviewee, I often tend to ask what's the most important in their perspective in terms of moving forward with these programs. And I've learned a diverse amount of perspectives. I've had folks who've said that they hope they don't have their jobs because they hope that prisons don't exist. And I've had folks who simply believe that these programs need to expand. So I think it's really important to note that there are many ways and many ideas out there about rethinking incarceration. Now, lastly, just in terms of looking ahead, I think it's important to say that, again, project is still very much in the works with final interviews to conduct is in addition to a written dissertation. But I would just like to say this is research that I'm very passionate about, and it's research that I'd love to carry on with beyond AP research, beyond this research project, hopefully into maybe a career of law and research in college and so forth. And lastly, today, I'd just like to say a very quick thank you to the MME again for not just providing me a research advisor and a mentor, of course, but also a role model of someone who I really think has not just allowed me to become a better researcher, but a better human being over these past 8 months. Now, today, I'd just like to leave you with by saying that although I have learned that there's many limitations to correctional education, I do think it's important that these programs need to be transformed, that rather than be transient and limited, I think they need to be permanent. And I hope that this can become so in order to offer the type of justice and the type of programs that I believe that we all deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cade, for that presentation. I am going to give the floor to Andrew Nyborg for the first question.
Cade, that was fascinating. A subject I know nothing about, but that, yeah, super fascinating. I'm super passionate about education and STEM education in particular, and your, I think, work in this correctional institution education is just fascinating. So a couple questions. You know, how is success, or are there metrics for success in these programs? So is it measured in any way when someone leaves a program like this? Is there any way in which people sort of look at that and say success has been achieved?
Perfect. Well, yeah, of course. Just first, thank you very much for the questions. I really appreciate it. And in terms of just the metrics, if you will, there is. So in terms of my research, obviously it's very qualitative based, but there's just a plethora of research out there, especially on the quantitative side, in terms of measuring recidivism, which ultimately is just looking to
Cade, I'm going to interrupt you just for 1 second.
Of prisoners re-entering these programs, what's the rate of prisoners re-entering various correctional facilities, and based off the implementation of various correctional education programs, essentially the folks who admit.
Sorry about that. I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Your audio is a little bit choppy. Sometimes for me, it works better if my camera is off and just the audio works. That might be a troubleshoot. Give it a shot.
Perfect. Can you hear me by chance?
Yes. Let's see if this works.
Okay, so sorry about that. So in response to your question, Mr. Nyborg, in terms of the metrics, just to begin real quick once more, although my research isn't too concerned with the metrics in terms of how these programs are successful or perhaps not successful, but a lot of the literature that I've come across throughout this study is that a lot of the quantitative studies especially are looking to measure one thing in common, which is recidivism, just a general term to describe, you know, the rate of reentering for prisoners into various correctional facilities. Now, the thing that's really interesting for me, at least, that I'll just say real quick in terms of recidivism is that it's very contentious within academia, just because it is very difficult to measure. You know, there's just so many people, there's millions of people, again, going back to the stat I had in the presentation, in these facilities. So in terms of how this success is measured, it's very contingent on who's actually doing the research. So that's certainly a gap within just that field of research in itself, and it's also something that I'd be very interested in exploring.
I have one other question, if I can. So you mentioned that STEM classes, STEM instruction is underrepresented in this type of curriculum and these institutions. And so one of the obvious limitations you mentioned would be setting up labs, which that has some obvious problems that I can see. But what else? Like, is it a lack of teachers? Is it a lack of appropriate curriculum? Like what is the limitation besides the fact that I can't set up a chemistry lab? Because I could think of many other sort of STEM areas that wouldn't require necessarily a lab. That could still be done. So what else might be a limitation there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of what I've come across throughout these interviews that I'm doing, which is obviously kind of the heart of my research, is just trying to understand not only how the programs are implemented, but also just like the day-to-day processes that go on when folks are teaching in the classrooms. And I think the best response to your question here is just how stringent some of the security guidelines are. I know that although you certainly mentioned, you know, there's a lot of science courses that don't need to bring in things like chemicals or things that require a lab necessarily. But I do think just based on from what I've learned, you know, based on what you can even wear into a correctional facility is so difficult to bring in, let alone all the materials that are brought in are checked. Sometimes they're not even allowed, they're thrown out immediately. I've heard stories of people who've lost all their books at the gates. So I think it's really just trying to establish a working relationship with the correctional facility, but at the same time, that's just going to be contingent on the correctional officers in the prison that you're working with. But I will say the interest is certainly there. I think professors and academics love to work in these kind of programs, but I think it's really just starting to drive a relationship between the institutions that offer it, as well as the correctional facilities that are offering the location for the education.
Thank you for that answer, Cade. I did want to flag before throwing it to another panelist. You have a question in the chat from one of our actual, our other volunteers. He says, I'm most curious about how this experience shaped Cade's view of the correction system. Does it work? Are there better ways? So if you want to speak to that now, or if another panelist has a question to build off that potentially.
Sure. Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic question. So at the outset, when I first started to read some literature pertaining to mass incarceration, correctional education, all of that, it's really not a novel idea. You know, I could get into a bit of the history of that, but I will not do that. But, you know, I think rehabilitation in prisons is something that's been really a topic of study matter since the 70s. And it's something that's fluctuated over time. Obviously, the Violent Crime Bill passed in '94 kind of cut funding for these programs. So there was a bit of a gray area there, and then getting revived in these past 5 years or so with some more federal funding. But I will say in terms of just from what I've learned as to whether I think things work, whether I think correctional education works, I do. You know, obviously this research is research. I want it to be objective, although it is qualitative at the same time. But I really do think in terms of what I've seen from the folks that I've interviewed, it's hard not to believe that once students undergo these kind of programs that they don't enter their communities as better people. And I think the work is just so meaningful and inspiring. But again, I think a really important point to highlight there is just there needs to be more funding. There needs to be more resources for more students to get these kind of opportunities.
Thank you, Cade. And since I threw that one in from the chat, I do want to extend your Q&A for one moment, if you can stick with us to see if any of our panelists have an additional question.
I did want to ask Cade, we know our criminal justice system is very skewed racially, right? It's been well documented. Do you see any kind of skew in a classroom? You know, as for example, are the students in the classroom reflective of the prison population, or do you see some skews or in terms of the instructors?
Yeah, another great question. I think in terms of just the demographics, obviously, at least from the vast majority of research studies out there, and also from what I've learned from interviewees, the vast majority of inmates in the US prison system are Black men. And in terms of the students that are often enrolled in these programs also tend to be Black men. There's a lot of research that goes into kind of, you know, the ages and the types of education and so forth. But I think kind of the interactions between not only the inside students, which is often referred to just as the inmates, and then the outside students, because there's often college students working within them. There is quite a divide. I had the chance to sit down with one of the instructors at DePaul University, and she was telling me a story about their inside out prison exchange program. And just in terms of, there was a story where I don't think they were letting in any of the college students who, she said, about 90% white young women into this because of the clothing that they were wearing. And they're perhaps afraid of some sort of altercation that would happen in the classroom. I don't think that's reflective of what really happens, but I think there's kind of that looming fear from people who work in these facilities. But I will say, just to kind of wrap things up, things are disproportionate, and I think the data is clear. I think obviously, going back to what I said before, resources need to be devoted. And I think there's just too many tragic stories out there of people who unfortunately have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, or simply just don't have the type of opportunities that maybe I have, or that maybe some other folks have. And I think it's just so important to kind of get the word out and get the message out and try to reform things as soon as possible.
Thank you, Cade. Unfortunately, we do have to move on. All of these Q&As will feel short today because our student researchers are so impressive. I appreciate you all sticking with us through that slight technical difficulty. And we are going to hear from our next group here. This group will be receiving our Pixel Perfect Award for a project in the tech sphere. And once again, I will let their teacher introduce them.
Hi, my name is Janine Stevens. I teach engineering courses at Bartlett High School in Bartlett, Illinois, where we house our district's STEM magnet program. I have a group of 3 students that you're going to be hearing from today that have been working on a project together since the beginning of the year. They are all juniors. Evan Bulatek is an aspiring robotics and mechatronics engineer who is a key member of our robotics team at our school. Dylan Sulit is looking forward to having a career in the medical field, possibly as a biomedical engineer or as a trauma surgeon, and he plays volleyball. And Rowan Culotta is also looking at the medical field for his future, and he is most interested at this point in anesthesiology, and he is one of our varsity cheerleaders. So the course that I teach these students in is called Engineering Design and Development. And this course basically takes students through the entire engineering design process from beginning to end. And so some of the steps in that process are, first of all, the students need to define a problem of their choosing. They research to see how other people have solved the problem. They write criteria for a solution that they will then design and build. They will test their design against their criteria, and then after they've completed their testing and analyzed it, they will refine their design a little bit and make some recommendations on the project as a whole. So currently, we are in the middle of the building stage of this project, and so this team has actually started building their prototype. They are getting ready to test it, and they have been working with a mentor named Matt Kubak, who has been in communication with them weekly, and they also do monthly video calls, which has been really helpful for this group. Matt, their mentor, has helped with not only the project management side of all of this, because it is a very large project to take on, but he also has been able to help and guide and direct them with some of the details of their design. And also he's challenged them to think about other paths that they could go down as well that they may not have considered in the past. And so the mentor relationship for them has been extremely helpful. And I'm excited for you to hear a little more about their project. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Evan Bulatek, and I'm joined today by Rowan Culotta and Dylan Sulit to discuss our research project. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the kind people at MME for allowing us this opportunity to present. We recognize the value in this occasion, and we are extremely grateful to be able to share our work so far. We'd also like to thank our mentor, Mr. Kubak, for his immense support throughout all aspects of this project. Despite mountains of problems, he was always able to guide us to a solution. Before we begin, I have a quick question for you all. What do you think of when you hear the word driving? Freedom? Food? Perhaps friends? Well, for me, it was fear. I was simply terrified of driving. I had grown up with this image of my parents expertly multitasking, like reading Google Maps, listening to music, engaging in conversation, all while driving, and I thought that it would be easy. But oh, how wrong I was. I became distracted by these activities extremely quickly. Fortunately, listening to music and talking to others could be stopped, but unfortunately, looking down at my phone and dashboard for Google Maps could not be. After one particularly close call, I came to realize that enough was enough, and after meeting with Dylan and Rowan and finding out that they had the same problem too, we set to work.
In 2015, almost 400,000 U.S. drivers were injured due to distracted cell phone use. we wanted to lower this number, so we thought to display GPS information with the idea of having the driver be able to almost see through it onto the road. Think of Google Glass, or imagine Iron Man's heads-up displays from the Marvel movies. Our first idea of this was a projector that would project the GPS info onto the windshield. Although this idea came with some problems, as we had to find a way around the complex wiring, as well as deal with the intense glare from the projector. This led to our idea to use the phone's display screen itself as a source of reflection. Our idea for this was to use a secure basin to hold the phone and have it close to the windshield on the dashboard so that the windshield could reflect the image. We tweaked this design so that we added a pane of glass for the phone to reflect onto, and we also added a vertical orientation. We are also currently developing an app that will solve the mirror image of the phone so that it can display the correct directions. And this led to us creating and prototyping the design that we have today.
Now, before we get into our final design, we'll explain some quick concepts. Here's a mock-up of our model. We have a glass pane that attaches to a hinge and a phone attached to the base. Let's say that you turn the phone on and you go to your mapping system. We'll imagine this red line to be the image on the phone screen. Because the phone is backlit, the light from the screen will travel upward. That's how we can see the image normally. And then it will come into contact with this glass pane. Now, in true 80s MacGyver fashion, we're diverting the light from the phone with the glass pane, which serves somewhat as a mirror in that it can reflect the light at the angle, but of course we can still see through the glass. And what happens to the light that reflects off the glass? Well, it goes straight into our eyes. We'll actually be seeing the image on the glass while still being able to see through the glass and onto the road. But before we reveal our final design, we'll first return to our aforementioned mountain of problems.
In the interest of brevity, we won't list all of our difficulties, but we would like to highlight a specific few. An arising problem that we found was that when reflecting an image, it flips 180 degrees, so whenever we would reflect a map, it would direct the driver to go in the opposite direction. Our solution to this was to make an app that mirrors your phone screen 180 degrees, so it can display the image in its correct orientation. We are currently in the process of coding and creating this app. Another problem is related to dashboard adhesion. We wanted a method that wouldn't leave residue on the dashboard, but we also wanted it to be easily removable. We ultimately settled on 3M command strips, small flexible strips that do just that.
Without further ado, here's our final model, created in a professional CAD software called Autodesk Inventor. To begin, a user can attach their phone to the device via this spring-loaded clamping system. These extenders move outward and inward in order to accommodate for a wide variety of devices. A user can place this model wherever they want to on their dashboard, though we do recommend putting it in front of the steering wheel. Due to these movable pads on the bottom, which are made of flexible material, the design can be attached to any contour with the 3M command strips. Depending on the height of the user, the reflection of the glass may be a bit difficult to see, so we've added a hinge to adjust the angle of reflection. And for quick cleaning and travel, we've added a magnet system to remove the glass and its outline, as well as both parts of the hinge mechanism. With these elements, we believe this device can safely and effectively allow drivers to navigate without distractions from their phones. Thank you all for listening, and thank you again to MME for this opportunity to share our project.
All right, it looks like we have Evan and Dylan with us here, and Rowan as well. Welcome. The first question for this group goes to Dr. James Gillespie.
Thank you, and great job, group. Two questions. One, you mentioned 400,000 people that die per year. Any sense of how many lives you could save with this device?
We imagine that we could save around 30,000 per year because that is what it ends up being on average related to deaths. And with this, we can eliminate most of the phone-related injuries and deaths that are with distracted driving.
Great. And then, you know, auto manufacturers are always very sensitive to any extra cost added to a car. Any sense of, it strikes me your device will be relatively low cost, but any estimate about how much this would cost?
Yeah, that's very true. So we're looking to make the material very strong. So it can withstand a variety of weather conditions, like if it was super sunny one day, or even in the frigid cold. So to do that, we plan to use nylon, which is extremely strong and durable. So because of that, it will cost a bit more than using something like PLA, which is basically normal plastic. So overall, we're looking for the cost to come out to be around $60, which is fairly cheap considering the benefit that it could cause.
Great.
Thank you, James. I'm going to open it up to the rest of our panel if you all have questions for the group.
Great job with the presentation. Shante, you go first.
Thank you. Just wondering if you encountered any limitations throughout the project, and if so, would you be willing to share those with us?
Yes, so the design process that we went through was very difficult, and one of our main limitations was with the height of the driver who's going to be in the chair. So the way the reflection works, it really depends on how high up you are, and because the chair and the driver's seat can only move up and down about 5 inches in certain car models, and in others it can't move at all, the reflection angle is extremely important. So that's why we put a lot of emphasis on the hinge, which would allow us to be able to make the machine usable for a variety of people alike. And that was like probably the biggest limitation that we came across.
So I was going to say, first of all, great job with the presentation. I completely understood what this gadget will do, even if I'm not an expert in this area. My question for you is, have you thought of any other possible uses for this same technology, same idea? Not necessarily related to maps, but you know, the idea of projecting the image from your phone someplace else.
We have been considering a bit of that. So I'll first go into how this is actually being used in certain cars now. So this same technology is being used to project the dashboard information, like the speed of the car, how much gas it has left, onto the dashboard, just so it's super easy to see. But now that you mention it, the phone technology of how it can reflect an image on your phone into a pane, onto a pane of glass, it has a very wide variety of applications, it seems like. So that's definitely something that we would be happy to pursue in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question as well, if that's okay with time. But first of all, amazing job to this entire team. The video and everything, as was mentioned, was so clear, and it was very cool to actually see the designs that and the prototyping like phases that you went through. So awesome job. And so my question is around, obviously, like one of the innovative spaces that we're seeing today with the automobile industry is like automated cars or like self-driving cars. So I'm just curious, like, have you thought about what the future might look like in terms of this product, like how it could fit into that future, or more generally, maybe even like how we need to consider ethics and safety as we move forward with the driving industry?
Yes, a lot of our ethics that we considered in this were mainly pertain to the materials that we're using, because we consider that if someone were to get into a crash while using this, the glass might shatter. So we actually changed this to acrylic glass instead. And also for self-driving cars in the future, this technology would definitely be helpful, as the user is using their own phone and they can just reflect it. So if this was integrated into those cars in the future, that would be great also.
But also the perk of our device is that it's out of the way in hands of the user. So if you were in a self-driving car, you are more likely to be distracted by your phone, by notifications or something, because you're not always having your constant attention on the road. So with a device that has your phone safely out of the way and in an area that'll only project your phone or other necessary information, it's also good for instances like self-driving cars.
Thank Thank you all for that answer. We have one question from the audience that I'm going to throw out there as your final question, if that's all right. Colleen Egan says, I love this project, but I'm wondering if you thought about drivers who may have seizures, disorders, etc., triggered by contrasting lights and dark patterns. Is that something that you thought about as you were going through your design process?
That's a very interesting question, and we have considered some aspects of this. So there are certain types of glass that allow us to reflect an image that can, like the color of it can be changed. And there's certain warm light films that can be placed over the glass and actually integrated into the glass itself that can accommodate for these people who have these disabilities. So that's certainly a very interesting avenue to pursue, and we are definitely looking into that.
Thank you to all three of you. It was said before, but it's worth re-emphasizing. The presentation itself was really standout. The project is excellent, and you will all be receiving, again, a certificate and a gift card to recognize your presentation today and your award of the Pixel Perfect MME Award this year. Thank you so much for sharing your project with us and for participating in research this year. Having said that, we are going to move forward to our next student presentation. This is always a difficult transition because I think we could all talk to these students for a long time to hear more about their projects, but we must move on. So I will next share the recipient of our Rockstar Rookie Award, and I will let her teacher at Jones College Prep introduce her.
Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Miller and I'm an English teacher at Jones College Prep. Today I'm going to introduce my student Elizabeth. Before I introduce Elizabeth to you all, I wanted to talk a little bit about what AP Research is. This is the class in which Elizabeth completed her project. And this is the second year of a 2-year AP Capstone Diploma program. And in this year specifically, students plan and execute a work of original research. The culminating project is a 5,000-word research paper, as well as holding a 20-minute presentation and oral defense of their work. Additionally, students are paired with a mentor in their field, which is an invaluable resource as the students are often working in fields that I have no clue about. And so the students get to really work with somebody who is very aware of the current happenings in their field and the research that's going on. And if I had to describe Elizabeth's project, I would describe it in these 3 words. It's incredibly unique, it's incredibly ambitious, and it's very important. Elizabeth decided to do a work of art history, which is actually an area of study that I had not seen yet in AP Research. But I was really excited when she decided to do something in the humanities field because it's often an overlooked area of research, not just in our course, but in the world at large. So I want to make sure she has more of an opportunity to talk to you about what her project really is about. But I will just say that I'm incredibly proud of her work. I think that she took this in such an amazing direction, and I'm really excited for you to get to see and hear a little bit more about her process. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Egresits, and I am a current senior at Jones College Prep, and this is my project, Feminine Evolution and Expression of Women in 20th Century Norman Rockwell Illustrations. So my project surrounds art criticism. It's an area I've truly never explored before. I knew I wanted to complete a humanities project, and I wanted to involve both my passion for women's history and American history. However, in such unprecedented times, I knew I wanted to explore my own knowledge and go after an area I've never looked into before, and that was art criticism. I knew that analyzing art would be a challenge, but it's something that I luckily did not have to face alone. I had an incredible mentor, Christina, who walked me through every single step of the process, whether it be showing me how to use formal analysis to analyze my artwork, or sharing her own expertise and work with me to help me learn more. It's truly been such a rewarding experience, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to just begin my journey into art criticism. So ultimately, that leads me to my own research question, which is, to what extent does Norman Rockwell's illustrations of women in his work dismantle or reinforce changing media portrayals of women throughout the 20th century? So I wanted to look into how Norman Rockwell showed the evolution of women in the 20th century. Since it was such a pivotal time for women all across America, I wanted to see if artwork reflected these changes. So the way I conducted my project was I divided each decade up and gave them an individual painting. So I had every decade from the 1910s to the 1960s, and I labeled them based on a generalization of each woman, considering it'd be difficult to go into every single complex aspect of the women of America during each specific decade. So the ways in which I analyzed was through content analysis, and I looked at 3 key factors when looking at these paintings: appearance, context, and artistic choice. These helped me conduct my formal analysis and thoroughly answer my research question. So these are the illustrations that I used. I chose to pick images that not only highlighted the women, but I think gave a telling time of the decade itself. You can see the 1910s was a teacher, 1920s shows the suffrage movement, 1930s is a retreat back into the home. Finally, the 1940s, the war effort, 1950s, nuclear family, and 1960s, this kind of evolution back into a working woman. So while I'm still in the process of completing my data analysis, I have found some interesting findings. I use historical images like you see before, whether it be an accurate image of teachers of the time, or a quick image from the broadcast television program I Love Lucy, or the We Can Do It program that was launched across America during the war. I use these images to see if Rockwell was accurately showing the women of the times as they were, or if he was straying in a progressive or conservative manner. So the ways in which I conducted my findings was I labeled each decade either conservative or progressive based on the generalization of how the women of that time were treated. For example, the 1920s were progressive based on the suffrage movement and the flapper-esque era that took over during the time. And the 1950s was more conservative as this nuclear family was kind of pushed into women's agendas. And the ways in which I analyzed the paintings as progressive or conservative was if the woman in the illustration was a leading character, if she had an occupation, was she character first, appearance second, and the more conservative was if she was a secondary character, possessed a more domestic role, and if her appearance came first and her character was second. So although, as I said, my research is still being conducted and I'm still analyzing my data, I found that Rockwell was incredibly accurate and showed swift transitions between his illustrations. As you can see, he showed the brazen Rosie the Riveter in the 1940s and showed the mobilization of women in the war effort. And just as quickly, he showed the retreat back into that domestic nuclear family in the 1950s, which is with his marriage license image that graced the covers of the 1950s. So overall, I chose this project because I think that art gives a perspective into history that we can't really see elsewhere. There are textbooks and there are movies and there are a million other things that can tell us about the past, but I think that art says things that words cannot. And being able to look at these magazine covers that represented the culture, represented America, really helps us see what the past was in itself. And art is something that is often dismissed, but I think it's a really important factor in seeing who we were as a nation and who we have become. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that presentation. And we are going to transition now into a quick Q&A with you. Thank you for joining us. And I believe the first question for this round goes to Kyla.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was so cool. And a really unique twist on studying feminism today. So just a very interesting way to go about this whole study of how we've progressed as women and in our world itself. So I guess my question is, I'm really interested to hear now in our present day, obviously we have so many different types of media that we use to express ourselves, that women use to express ourselves, as well as just anyone, including like poetry or movies, TV, from Hollywood, even like TikTok and social media. So I'm really curious, like, do you think we can use similar methods that you had used in your study to kind of define our current period of time, or how might it look similar or different to what your study went about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think today is such a different time period in general, especially with the media, like you mentioned. I think that art, unfortunately, is a practice that you don't see as often, especially in like museums and even in music. I consider art. I think it is like a diminishing practice, but I think I define art as such a widespread thing. I think that today, like we as women express ourselves through videos and images and our own artwork and our own music and whatever it may be. I think that we can use whatever we project today. I think in future generations and years beyond, we will look at what we created today and see it as a reflection of the times, because truly I think art just goes beyond factual information or nonfiction work. It truly just like embraces the culture of our time. So I think that for as long as we are here on this earth, art can be something that can define us as people and define us as women.
That's awesome. And just out of curiosity, like from your studies and everything, do you have like something in mind that you think might define women in this day and age, like whether that be like a certain song or a movie or something of that you think is just representative?
I think for me, I've always wanted to study more musical things because I think music is a great reflection of art in itself. And I think today we have taken a lot of liberty in music, and just being able to freedomly like express ourselves through music is something that I really think defines us today. Again, there's so many genres and so many areas that like women are going into that we haven't in the past, and becoming such like a part of mainstream media is just so significant. And I think that's something that will like truly stand the test of time. And it's so great to see. Thank you.
Andrew, it looks like you've unmuted yourself. I was just going to say, anyone else with questions, please feel free. So go right ahead.
I'm curious if you think Norman Rockwell's work broadly represents sort of the United States of the times, or do you think that his work may be biased by the fact that, as I believe, he was largely raised and a product of the northeastern portion of the United States, which I think even today would be considered unique in some ways, probably representative of the United States in some ways, but not so much in others.
Oh, no, absolutely. I totally considered this. Norman Rockwell, not only was he his own version of like an idealist, he mainly focused on like happy settings, and it was all of my images were mainly upper middle class white families. That was definitely one of my limitations. I totally wanted to explore race and sexuality, but for the purpose of my project, I specified on white upper middle class women, because again, he didn't really make those reaches until the later portion of his artwork. But when I look at his reflection, I do look at it as a reflection of white women completely. It was not telling of the times between race and sexuality borders. And that was just a major limitation in my project that I wish I could have explored further. With the resources I had and the time I wanted to devote to it, I decided to stick to one mainstream just to make sure I could accurately depict it. But today, with the changing world, I don't think it reflects who we are today and even who we are then, because I mean, so much of American history has been downplayed, and I don't think it is a true reflection, but I think it is telling of the times for that specific group.
Really fascinating, thanks.
Wonderful. Maya, go right ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
That question from Andrew and your answer, Elizabeth, made me think of if you've had a chance or if you think you would be interested in maybe looking at other countries, artists from like Europe from that same era and their representations of what women stood for, or from other continents as well. I'm wondering if you've given that any thought, or if you've had a chance to maybe even study some other artists' production.
Yeah, it's an area I haven't had the chance to look into. It's something I truly do hope to look into. My grandparents are both from Eastern Europe, so understanding like the different, not only art styles, but like complexity of cultures that vary between nations is something I would love to go into and love to maybe minor in I applied for a lot of colleges minoring in folklore and mythology, because I think that's an area that really was significant to me growing up. And I think it's a great reflection of different countries. I completely would love to do it if I had the chance. I haven't, but exploring, especially in like African countries, how art is displayed is completely fascinating. So it's definitely an area I would like to explore.
Wonderful. And if we don't have any more questions, we are just about at time. So I will thank you again, Elizabeth, for your presentation and for showing again that research and the humanities do go hand in hand. That's a passion project of mine as well. So I love to see it represented. You will, of course, be receiving our New to Research Award, and you will receive that certificate and the gift card as well in the mail. I actually believe in the email. I'm just going off of the wrong dialogue here. Moving on to our next presenter, we will be seeing the presentation from Arsima Araya. She will be receiving our Engaging in Equity Award. And I will let her teacher introduce her as well.
Hi, my name is Kristen Massey, and I am an English and Social Studies teacher at Glenbard North High School. I'm honored to introduce to you Arsima Araya. I've been fortunate to teach Arsima in 3 classes and work with her through Glenbard North Civics Club. This school year, Arsima is capping off her academic career in my Advanced Placement Research course, and I'm part of a faculty committee advising a student initiative on equity and diversity, which Arsima is spearheading. Over the course of the 3 years I've known Arsima, I've watched as she has used her rare combination of intellect and self-discipline to achieve academic success. But perhaps more important, Arsima has harnessed her talents and passion to develop into a civic engagement powerhouse, leading efforts to combat injustice and increase youth activism in our school and the broader community. When Arsima identifies a goal, she is truly unstoppable. I'll focus first on Arsima's accomplishments in the AP Capstone program. AP Research, the second course in the Capstone program, involves a year-long student-designed research project, during which students develop their questions, conduct literature reviews, undertake field research, and synthesize findings in academic papers and formal presentations, an experience very similar to that of writing an undergraduate thesis. Early in the year, Arsima identified a research question that closely aligns with her interest in social justice and youth activism. That question focuses on the experiences of politically marginalized youth activists, particularly those involved in racial justice movements, such as Black Lives Matter. Most students pursuing this type of question would choose to send out online surveys. While this is a perfectly acceptable approach to data collection, Arsima was looking for deeper understanding. With guidance from her mentor, Kanika Singh, Arsima learned how to conduct both ethnographic interviews and an autoethnography, which allowed her to engage in exploratory conversations with her participants, sometimes uncovering information that she couldn't have anticipated through survey questions. After conducting the data collection, Arsima launched into the qualitative data coding process, for which she again turned to Ms. Singh for expertise. Throughout, Arsima and Ms. Singh have communicated regularly through messaging and video conferencing on the MME platform. While Arsima is a superstar, I know her work has been elevated through this partnership. Ultimately, I believe Arsima's research will help her accomplish her larger goals to identify ways to create greater solidarity among activists and ultimately to create social change. But as I've mentioned, Arsima is more than a standout in the classroom. She is the most impassioned youth activist I've had the privilege to know. Arsima has used the skills she's honed in her extracurricular activities, particularly speech team and newspaper, to write and deliver oratory under pressure. Arsima's proudest moment, and one I had the honor to observe, was when she was asked to read The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus at the swearing-in of our United States Congressman Sean Casten, whom Arsima had helped to elect. Arsima stood before a crowd of hundreds of adults, including United States Senator Dick Durbin, and she nailed it. Arsima was only a sophomore at the time, and her capability to captivate a crowd has only grown since then. I can only imagine how her voice will continue to shape her community and this country, and I am so excited for you to hear it right now.
Hello, my name is Arsima Araya, and this is my research presentation to the Student Research Showcase on the sociopolitical development of Black youth. I would like to begin with a question. Have you ever had someone tell your story and replace your face until no one could see or hear you? This feeling mirrors my experiences as a daughter of first-generation immigrants and being a Black woman in America. Whether it is in the media or classroom textbooks, I witnessed the repeated attempts to silence marginalized voices like my own. With the revival of the Black Lives Matter movement, people around the world are attempting to become more conscious of the inequities Black folks face. My question focuses on the group that is at the center of change, Black youth, such as me. Leading me to today's inquiry, how does sociopolitical development impact the resiliency and empowerment of Black youth? My research will explore how sociopolitical development impacts the resiliency and empowerment of Black youth under the centuries-long structures of racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, and more that exist. And most importantly, it aims to understand how Black youth become and stay empowered and resilient against the global systems of oppression that exist. First, I will review my background research. My research is constructed upon the theoretical concept of sociopolitical development, authored by Roderick J. Watts, Derek M. Griffith, and Jaleel Abdul Adil. The term is defined as a process of growth in a person's knowledge, analytical skills, emotional faculties, and capacity for action in political and social systems. I decided to focus on sociopolitical development's impact on resiliency and empowerment due to the language of the definition. Now I will examine empowerment. Empowerment is defined as a process of increasing personal or interpersonal or political power individuals can take to improve their life situations. And lastly, resiliency refers to the process of adapting within adversity and resorting to adaptive methods despite the major assaults on the developmental process. Now I will explain my research design. It was modeled by 3 qualitative methods: phenomenology, qualitative coding, and autoethnography. First, I took a phenomenological approach by conducting in-depth interviews with voluntary participants. The questions were designed to explore the participants' life experiences in the area of sociopolitical development, resiliency, and empowerment. Second, I performed qualitative coding of interview transcripts. My MME mentor, Mrs. Sodia, directed me towards using this method in my research. The coding method I'm using is the grounded theory approach by Johnny Saldana, which looks at categories derived from analysis to create a new theory from the original theory. And lastly, autoethnography. Mrs. Sodia shared her autoethnography, which inspired me to pursue one for my paper. As we discussed, autoethnography would allow me to weave in my experiences with that of my research, since I am a young Black woman, a part of Generation Z. Now I will review my data and analysis. I interviewed 10 participants from throughout the Illinois state. Considering that I'm still in the early stages of my data analysis, I'm presenting preliminary findings that I believe will be conclusive once I finalize my analysis. The categories I derived in the process of coding came down to 5 shared experiences across the 10 participants: becoming Black, intersecting identities, recognizing representation, avenues for affinity and affirmation, and envisioning liberation and future conversations. First is becoming Black. Each participant encountered critical points in their life where they learned of what being Black in America means and how it would impact them in their daily lives. Second is intersecting identities. In addition to being Black, my participants came from diverse backgrounds. 2 identified as queer, 4 as mixed race, and 2 were first-generation immigrants such as myself. All were bonded in the process of learning to embrace their identities while learning not to reject their Blackness. Third is recognizing representation. Participants explained who in their life had impacted how they understood and overcame oppression. The representation ranged and offered empowerment when they saw themselves reflected in those who were in the spaces where typically a Black person wouldn't be. Fourth is avenues for affinity and affirmation. All participants had participated in an organized community setting where the goals of overcoming oppression through sociopolitical action. These avenues included cultural affinity groups such as Black Student Union or African American Student Union situated in educational institutions. And lastly, envisioning liberation and future conversations. Participants described their vision of liberation and how we could expand the conversation of resiliency and empowerment beyond just our interview. Each offered different ways that we could grow the resiliency of Black youth through offering new avenues for empowerment. Lastly, we will review the value of my research inquiry. The research appears to affirm the theory of sociopolitical development. Therefore, it will offer additional literature to the theory through the perspective of Black youth, which was not studied before. Furthermore, this study analyzes how we as a collective in all areas can rally and support the movement for equity in all Black lives. And lastly, this research comes together to understand and explore the development of Black youth under oppressive systems by amplifying their voices. I wanted to amplify my voice through this research because I knew by offering a mic to my participants, I could then see myself reflected in the work, and millions of other Black youth can feel the same. So we must continue the conversation surrounding equity and inclusion to ensure we are protecting and prospering as a community. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful job. And I'm going to invite Arsima, if you are able to put your camera on, feel free, welcome. And I believe today's first question goes to Shantae.
Arsima, this is an amazing topic. One that's really kind of, I think, personally of interest to me based on the work that I do. So one, just want to offer myself as a resource in the community and who works with a lot of young people. If you ever need anything, please let me know. Really activated by what you kind of introduced and uncovered here. And I have a few questions, but I'll start with two. One is, I imagine that this was transformative for you. So would you mind sharing how this has impacted you and or shifted your views and or your understanding of yourself and your position in this movement?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. And that was one of the reasons why I chose to use the research method of an autoethnography, because I can obviously tell you guys here today how I feel about the research, but I wanted to give anyone who ever stumbled across my paper, whether it be an AP grader or some curious student, have that opportunity to hear my voice, because I am a person, a part of the demographic that I'm researching. So for you all today, something that really impacted me was, it was so validating to hear everyone share their experiences and see myself in their struggles and in their understanding of what it means to be Black, and learning how to love your Blackness and learning that it's not limiting, but it's actually extremely empowering when you learn that although we're all people with plethoras of identities and we belong to so many groups, sometimes it feels that one is overtaking the other, and that's all that represents you. So it was such a privilege to hear not only my peers validate my feelings and me validate theirs, but also understand that everyone is going through this transformative experience during their adolescence. And I think we can all say adolescence is hard. You're going through high school and, significant other problems, and you're trying to balance work and play. And on top of it, we have people who are really learning what it means to be who they are. And we have these young high schoolers, college students, or people in graduate level classes learning every day that their Blackness is not something that is meant to hold them back, but in fact, it's something to lead with and offer perspective to, because it's such a, I will say it's such a privilege being Black. It's an honor to carry this identity, just as it is an honor to be who you all are. So this has been transformative in a way that I've appreciated my culture more. I've appreciated learning about other people's experiences and just understanding that there is diversity in Blackness, and that we are a diaspora of people that are growing, shifting, and changing at a time where we all are. So if we're going to grow, we might as well grow together and learn that we can work together at the end of the day. So that's how it's been.
That was an awesome answer. The one more is just, so obviously you mentioned that you interviewed 10 people, I believe. Are you one of those 10?
No, I'm not one of those 10, as much as I would love to be. The concept of me using an autoethnography was so that I could have almost like a interviewing myself experience. I feel like I've mentioned autoethnography a couple times, so I'll also explain that as well. So an autoethnography is, well, I'll start with an ethnography, is basically a distinct group within a culture of people. So like an ethnography could be like Game of Thrones super fans, like that's an ethnography, but at this time I'm looking at Black youth, a part of Generation Z, which is a very niche group. So all of my participants were born after 1994, and had identified with at least some level of Blackness. So some of my participants were mixed. I had 4 participants that were mixed with white or Asian American heritage. And with their perspectives, as I was transcribing their experience, like what our interviews were, I would revisit each section and write down like basically my 2 cents. Like, hey, this is my perspective. Can I relate to this experience? Can I connect this experience to something that has happened in history? So that was how my perspective was shown in the research. And in my paper, I'm taking passages from the research with the categories that I created and integrating my own perspective into those. So for example, I'll explain becoming Black. So one of the things that I realized was that when I'm a first generation immigrant, so I didn't really like have anybody give me a talk on what it means to be Black. I kind of went through my own discovery of what it means to be Black because my parents were going through it as well. They didn't understand that Blackness had the implications that it has. So it was kind of like, do you know what's going on? I don't know what's going on, but let's get through this together. And in that section, I'm writing that I didn't really have that guidance from my parents, but rather I learned from my peers, I learned from teachers, I learned from mentors, and I learned from the media what it means to be Black. And it was surprising that people who were Black themselves or were foundational Black Americans, which are those who were descendants of enslaved people, they also had to go through that self-discovery. And I always thought everyone just has a talk. Like I planned on giving my kids a talk because I didn't want them to go through that self-discovery on their own. So that's one of the elements of the autoethnography I will be writing about. So check that out when I publish.
Thank you so much, Arsima. This is a phenomenal project, and I want to open it up to our other panelists to ask questions as well.
So this is amazing, and you're in a topic that I know nothing about, but I'm curious. How do you take the enthusiasm and the knowledge that you have from your experience and the experiences of these other 10 individuals, and put that into something that you can then pass on to generations and people behind you that makes a meaningful impact in their life? How do you take this and make a difference for people behind you?
Yeah, I love that question. It's kind of like, how do I put me on paper? So one of the things that I thought would be the best to show that like this is as a sign of the times as possible was really write my intro around the past year surrounding the awakening in racial justice and equity. I think in the past year, everyone has gone through some level of socio-political development in the past few months. And basically anyone can go through it. I think that was one of the things I regret not adding in my presentation. Everyone goes through socio-political development. It's just a matter of how far we progress as a society. So there are 5 critical points that we take as a society to get there. And I think that the paper not only reflects what we've gone through the sign of the times with Black Lives Matter and, you know, the fight for just recently, as we all, in case our audience members don't know, like there was a hate crime against Asian Americans recently. And these are just some of the things that oppression manifests into. It manifests into hate, it manifests into hate crimes. And I really want to make sure that my introduction and just the paper itself reflects that as well as possible. So Mr. Nyborg, I have some homework to do to make sure that I'm making it as representative as possible. But that's my biggest thing, making sure that at each point, I'm once again referencing that this is a very impactful time that we're living in, and that when people look back at 2020 or look back at 2021, they're like, this is what was happening, this is what people were talking about, and this is the conversation we need to keep having. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to pull up a question here from the audience as well before we let you off the hook. One question here says, I loved being an active part of the third wave of feminism because of the intersectionality of the movement and the power of the collectiveness. How is intersectionality impacting your research on your perspective on human complexity? Great question.
That's a wonderful question. So one of the things that, one of the categories that I created was called Intersecting Identities, because I realized that some of my participants were very diverse people. Like they were diverse in terms of sexuality, diverse in terms of what religions they practiced, diverse in location. So these were all things that I had to, oh, and also gender and gender identity. So these were all things I had to consider when I was, making sure that I was trying to amplify their voice as much as possible, because I didn't want to only focus on their Blackness, but I also wanted to amplify that they are Black and this. I'm Black and a woman. I'm Black, but I'm also a light-skinned woman. That means I get privileges that maybe dark-skinned women wouldn't have. So that's just some of the ways I've tried to make sure that their other identities were seen was through that category, intersecting identities. So that way people knew that Black youth aren't just Black youth. We're nerdy Black youth. We're funny Black youth. We're music enthusiasts. We're speech kids. And we have amazing interests and passions. And like I said earlier, our Blackness is not meant to be limiting. It's meant to be empowering, and it's meant to be something that we bring to the table, not something we hide from. So I hope that answered their question.
Perfect. Yeah, I see they say, thank you for the thoughtful answers. So I think you did a great job. I also just want to flag that I can see the speech kid in you, so that comes across as well.
Oh, geez. Well, I just wanted to say before I log off, because I realized I didn't say this in my presentation either. Thank you so much to ISTI and MME for this opportunity. I hope that we can all take the chance to continue fighting for the liberation of all people, because it's a fight that we all have skin in the game for. So thank you.
Thank you. And you, of course, will be receiving our Engaging in Equity Award. Thank you again for your presentation and your thoughtful answers in this Q&A as well. Thank you again to all of our panelists. And I did also want to send a quick thank you to the 5 mentors who were active in these presentations. So Carl Albrecht, Zach, Matt, Christina, and Kanika, thank you all so much. And I'm going to actually turn it over for the final part of this presentation, closing remarks, back to Emily Cooper. Emily, if you would like to join now, feel free to take it. I think we're just pulling her up. If you will all sit tight for just 1 second.
Hello, I'm back.
There we are.
See me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much to today's presenters. I was so inspired by today's presentation. I can't wait to see where these students' paths will take them. I know they'll be successful in whatever they choose to pursue. ISTI learns from them every day. Today was definitely no different. We hope to see them back in our program as mentors to future high schoolers down the road, inspiring the next generation. Thank you again to our event sponsor, National Louis University, and to our incredible panelists. A special acknowledgement goes to our teachers. We would love it if you would show them some appreciation in the chat. They've navigated a school year that no one could have imagined. They're rock stars, and ISTI is so proud to work alongside them. So we appreciate their support of their students that got us here today. Another shout out to the mentors who worked with our students are at the core of our program. Your impact was showcased here today, and we hope you'll return to mentor next year's students. Today was also a dedication to you. And finally, thank you to everybody who attended today. We appreciate you showing up to support our students and the research that was presented. Please consider being a virtual mentor, donating to provide access to mentorship to more students across the state so that they can be at next year's Student Research Showcase, and follow along on our social media. We have a brand new summer programming starting in June, so stay tuned for exciting updates on that. We hope to see many of you at the culminating event for our other program, our STEM Challenge Showcase, taking place on April 29th. Stay healthy, find joy, and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and we will see you next year.